Good evening, this is Goldie, also known as Mr. Anecdotal, Mr. Pasty, and the Talking Head. It's Wednesday, June 8th, 2011. Remember, most importantly, I rant so you don't have to. If I don't have your email and you'd like to receive the script of each show, even though a lot of it's off script, send your email to my new email address, which is goldierant@gmail.com. Just when I think that I'm out, they pull me back in. No fight for civil liberties is ever done. There's always a new intrusion, some new stupidity, some new company that wants to make money selling us cameras, data tracking devices, and infrared house scanners. You have to watch the largest piece of propaganda produced in the last 10 years called Killing Bin Laden. It's on right now on the Military Channel. It'll be on tonight again at 11. You can watch it on the Military Channel or Discovery Channel, and then list the 10 major themes in that propaganda piece. Let's talk about it. Here's a brief summary of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about a legislative proposal based on the alignment of Rick Perry wanting to run for president and needing to stoke the fire of Tea Party activists. The proposal is the disclosure on the ballot itself of how much each household will owe per year if a bond proposal passes. I'm going to talk about ignorance and a new neighborhood group of racist people that want to put up cameras to see our sons and daughters taking showers in their bathrooms. I'm going to talk about how the Libyan rebels that the U.S. is supporting are committing acts of torture, but it's okay because it's our guys doing it. One of the keys to this rant is realizing that we are issue-based, not party-based, which allows us to use whatever means necessary to get our point across. For example, I'd said a few months ago that since Rick Perry was running for president, and he said at the beginning of the legislative session in Texas that eminent domain was an emergency item, then no matter how much you don't like him, and no matter that he was the one that created the eminent domain emergency through his giveaway of the commons with his Trans-Texas corridor, we needed to nonetheless use him to get our eminent domain legislation passed. It became a call to action. Now, and nothing ever came of it, so it really wasn't the emergency that sanctuary cities and abortion are. Well, we have another call to action, and it is based on work done by my Tea Party friend. My friend attended a work session regarding an upcoming bond proposal for Travis County. It turned out that he was the only one that had read the edict for the bond proposal, which was that the various committees that these guys set up were to opine on if and how much the proposal would amount to. So they were supposed to determine whether or not there should be a bond proposal, and then if there was supposed to be one, then how much the proposal should be for and who should get what, etc. It turns out that everyone forgot the prong about if we should issue new bonds, and they were all there to make sure that their pet projects got funding through this borrowed money source. You may remember that I called out our mayor, Lee Leffingwell, when the city of Austin was putting forward a bond package for parks, roads, and utilities, and our illustrious mayor stated that this would not raise taxes. A total lie. Well, in the Travis County budget, there's a line item of $50 million per year for debt service to be paid out of revenues. And this does not include the new proposal for a $400 million new courthouse, a new Travis County courthouse. My friend asked a bunch of questions like, how much will this add per household and how much does each household now owe? Questions for which he received no answers, as though the if prong was a done deal. As you may know, I do not normally deal with spending issues, except where they are giveaways to donors. But this really bothered me and my friend. He suggested that there needed to be a way to inform those voters that their vote on these bond proposals, there needed to be a better way to inform these voters that vote on these bond proposals, a better yardstick besides the lies that public officials tell regarding no taxes needed, and a total number that this would cost each household. A pretty simple thing. It would be a disclosure, a sunshine thing. My friend was able to get an estimate of $20 per household per $100 million in bonds at current interest rates for municipal bonds. So that means that so a new courthouse would cost each household in the county approximately $80 per year for the life of the bonds. And that's just the average household. That's, obviously $1 million home would pay more in taxes if they set a tax rate higher to pay for it. It's not like you would pay your $80. But $80 is the average. Also, there's no amortization of the bonds, which is what we discovered. There is no principal reduction, except the $400 million owed at the end of the bond, 20 years down the road. This scared the ever-living crap out of me and him. And this was really, really a painful thing, because these bond proposals come up all the time, and I'll be honest with you, I've generally voted for them if they were parks. But I assumed there was actually going to be some principal reduction. And if you think back over the last 10 years, the way the issuers, the way the people that sold the bonds sold it to the city of Austin was that you've been issuing bonds at 7%, interest rates have dropped, let's pay those off with new bonds that are at 4%. And let's just keep rolling. And no city council has ever bothered to figure out how are we going to pay off the billions, literally billions that the city owes. And with Travis County's new one, it will be $1 billion. There is no method. They have no idea how these bonds will be paid off. And that is the scam. I mean, it's relatively similar to what the feds are doing. Feds just issue money. It's the same kind of thing, by selling a treasury bond, the Chinese. And the only way that they think that they're going to pay it off, they actually don't even think they're going to pay it off. Now, if you multiply this times every municipality and every county and every state that allows the selling of bonds, the state of Texas Constitution does not allow it. Think of the total amount of indebtedness that's out there. Think about it. It will never be paid off. There is no method. Growth won't do it. Because for growth, you got to spend money on new roads and new utilities and new parks. It won't do it. I'm scared. He's scared. Now let's go to this specific item, this specific legislative item. The idea that would be, and we used Layman, my roommate. His name is A. And we used him, I call him Layman, because you can just ask him questions like this. Are you willing to pay $80 more per year so that we can build a new courthouse? Answer, no. Guess what? I haven't talked to a single person who, when they heard that number, said yes. Now, he rides his bike downtown, and there's an area of the trail that has pebbles that makes you get flat tires. I've done it too. They need about $10 million to finish that trail. So that would cost about $2 per year, right? 1/10 of 20 per household, forever, to finish that trail. Would he vote for that? Yes. Would other people who don't ride bikes vote for it? No. But you'd be able to see the amount that this bond proposal is going to cost. Because otherwise it's a lie. It's uninformed. You're giving uninformed consent, which I've talked about in the past. Now, I talked to a buddy of mine about this. He said there's no way you could get that thing passed. Well, the interesting thing would be that Rick Perry is running for president. So the call to action is getting Perry to install new legislation requiring any municipality wanting to sell a bond to show how much indebtedness is already outstanding, how much of it will be owed at the end of the bond term, and the amount that each new item would cost each household annually. It's a classic Tea Party issue that will help him in his quest for the presidency. An alignment, which leads us to a call to action. Call or email Perry and your state legislators and ask Perry and them to include this item in the special session or to bring it up at the next legislative session in 2 years. It will certainly end up having we will have much more debate on individual issues. In other words, somebody that wants to do something in a town like Trail will really have to convince all the voters that it's worth the $11 per person forever. Forever. Because it will never be paid off. Plus, I don't even want to talk about what's going to happen if you cannot sell new bonds at the end of the term. can't even think. It's the same problem I talked about a couple of weeks ago with the Chinese foreclosing on the UST bonds, taking over commons, roads, parks, national parks. The right to pollute under existing regulations which are insufficient. Same thing happens on a local level. What are the bondholders going to do? They'll end up owning the road. That's what happened with that Southwest Parkway. Bondholders own the road. Travis County actually bought it. Martins Connolly was responsible for that. John Connolly. Scary. I was watching Travis County Access after my friend had been there to see if I could see him, and an agenda item came up to sell 7+ acres of parkland to the Pflugerville Development Corporation to help them with access around the new Tollway 130. Apparently, the 130 Tollway will require a reworking of access to this park, and a part of it is selling off, a part of that problem is selling off 7+ acres of parkland. So there's two problems. There's access to the park, and then there's some problem with access to the tollway. My thought here is that this is another example, a classic example, of a corporation privatizing the profits and commonizing the costs of the tollway. When they gave the state the total cost of Tollway 130 and the projections for profits, it clearly did not count on a reworking of access around this park and a reworking of access to this park. So we Travis County taxpayers are solely subsidizing this cost for this private company that runs the tollway under the concessions that Rick Perry granted. Now there's two parts of this that really bother me. The first part is that this is a commons and we are subsidizing somebody else's profits. We Travis County taxpayers. And there's a whole bunch of people that use the tollway. Definitely not just Travis County people. In fact, most Travis County people don't use the tollway. It's people going around the city of Austin. So as usual, they're like, this is all it's going to cost, and then who knows how many more of these types of problems are out there caused by 130 and its placement. And as usual, the wrong question was asked, and we did not get the total cost in order to get it passed. That's how they do it. We have a new F1 track that's being proposed, and the City of Austin is trying to make sure the taxpayers will never be on the hook for it. Well, they will. No matter how hard they look, we will. Now, the second part that really bothers me is we're selling 7 acres of parkland, maybe the most important commons that a government is in charge of caretaking. Why don't we force them to do something totally different that does not involve us selling off any parkland? They were bragging about how we were receiving 4 times the initial valuation of it. We shouldn't be selling any parkland ever. As far as buying it, if all the people in the county are willing to buy more parkland and are willing to know that forever it will cost blank dollars per household, I'm okay with that. I want that to happen. But if they don't want to pay for it, you don't get the parkland. So not only do we have ourselves subsidizing a private company, but we're subsidizing them by selling off valuable commons, which we should never do. All right. I heard very recently that one of my neighborhood groups is suggesting cameras on the same corner that was going to be showing images of the inside of my house. Here we go again. You may remember back in February of 2010, I led a group of opponents to kill the proposed Austin Police Department cameras to be located at East 12th Street and Chicon in Austin. I actually did something called a lobbying memo that was one of these rants. I took my 3-minute speech and I tore it apart. I will do that again. And that lobbying memo would assist anyone that opposed cameras anywhere. It was mainly a set of questions that could not be answered by the police, and until they were answered, an individual could not make an informed decision regarding such cameras or recommendation. Since that time, I have received no communications from the cops that cornered me after my speech, even though I had a legitimate list of questions for them. Remember, they assured me, this won't be a problem. We'll never do that. We'll never disclose images, digital images of girls changing into prom dresses in West Virginia, like was done by FBI agents. Now, I was informed that a neighborhood association, which I am a member, wants to put up cameras at 13th and Chicon to stamp out the evil crimes that they know are going on there. They know it. My house is within the sweep of the proposed cameras. Now that's both literal and figurative, that statement. Here's where I start to lose it. This group of neighbors is intelligent and generally Democrats, okay? That's just how Travis County is. The president of the association is a lawyer and probably had to take constitutional law. So he knows what a slippery slope is. I'm going to read a few emails to show the ignorance of this group of people, and this lawyer in particular. I sent an email to this lawyer and a few other dipshits in the neighborhood. This is it. I'm somehow not on the list for meetings and agendas. I just learned that there was an agenda item regarding cameras at 13th and Chicon. Put me on the next agenda to discuss this item again. As you may know, we trust no one to keep any digital images of our sons and daughters showering off of YouTube. APD has never answered any of the questions, and I mean any of the questions that were raised during the 12th and Chicon camera discussions. So I have to ask, who initiated this crap again? Thanks, Goldie. And I sent that to like 5 people. And then the president responded to my friend T. Any chance Sweet Hill Neighborhood Association would support cameras at 13th and Chicon area? Signed, lawyer. She responds, lawyer, I don't know. We wrote a letter against it. You'll have to ask the neighborhood association. Unless you have some proof that the cameras will not have the zoom and scope to invade the privacy of people in Sweet Hill, and anywhere really, I will oppose them and urge others to do so as well. We have a lot of attorneys who are privacy advocates in Sweet Hill. Signed, T. From the lawyer to T. Do you support cameras in police cars? They have zoom capabilities and could be used to invade privacy as well. Signed, lawyer. Lawyer. Cameras don't set us free or keep us safe, and people forgot to turn them on or fix them all the time, wherever they are. I don't have the ability to influence cameras or not in cop cars. Not pointing cameras in our windows and in our yards and out our driveways 24/7 from utility poles and moon towers. I think there are plenty of people willing and able to fight that fight with me. If you're for school kids getting taped all over our neighborhoods, let me know. A little smiley face there. Was Goldie at your last neighborhood meeting? He knows quite a bit about this topic. Signed, T. I received the following response from the lawyer following my question as to who initiated this crap. Hey Goldie, I initiated it along with the majority of folks in our neighborhood, which means 4 of the 7 people that showed up at the neighborhood meeting. I think cameras have a potential to be an effective tool to help clean up 13th and Chicon. Notice the cameras went up at the Prayer Cafe and nobody hangs out there anymore. The underpinning of your argument is the assumption that APD will grossly misuse the cameras. I don't understand the basis for that assumption. The goal here is to collect video evidence to prosecute criminals and help clean up 13th and Chicon and surrounds, which I guess he means my house and my tenants. Is there a way we can achieve this goal while addressing your concerns? While there is strong support for the cameras within KNA, Keeling Neighborhood Association, I'd like to work together on this. Thanks. Lawyer. I sent another email. Lawyer, thanks for your response. Please give me a list of all of the affected homeowners where the sweep of the camera will be able to see onto any portion of their property. I will do the legwork from there. Also, when's the next meeting and where? And put me on the agenda. Thanks, Goldie. And he responded. To my knowledge, there are no imminent plans to install cameras, so I don't know where they'd be located. KNA discussed writing a letter of support for cameras directed at the drug market area. My suggestion is that we propose a plan that we all support. The question I have is, what would you and Sweet Hill Neighborhood Association be okay with, and would it allow sufficient coverage of the drug market areas to be effective? We are smart and reasonable people. We are smart and reasonable people. This is him talking to me. I bet we can come up with a solution allowing us to collect video evidence against criminals without violating the privacy of our neighbors. Perhaps we could also implement some conditions to ensure the cameras will be taken down upon neighborhood request. Let's see if we can agree on a plan and propose it to APD as a unified front. If we can do that, I think we'd have good odds of accomplishing something. Our next KNA meeting, blah, blah, blah. I'll put you on the agenda. We are not out to battle our friends and neighbors. Thanks, lawyer. A friend in the neighborhood who's kind of on this list sent us a link to a New York Times article. It was a pretty ugly one on the current COINTELPRO FBI surveillance going on in that neighborhood regarding domestic terrorism. One guy that, I don't know, they call him a domestic terrorist. The lawyer responded, "Right, I saw this. Goes to show that they will film you if they want to and search through your trash and spy on the quilts in your driveway. This was occurring without cameras at 13th and Chicon. In my opinion, cameras at 13th and Chicon won't increase the likelihood of this type of invasion of privacy. In my opinion, cameras at 13th and Chicon won't increase the likelihood of this type of invasion of privacy. The risk exists regardless of their presence. However, their presence might help catch some real criminals and help clean up our little cesspool of drug dealing prostitution. So it's a net gain, especially if we can put forth a solution that addresses our concerns." Lawyer. From another idiot in the neighborhood, M. I agree with lawyer's points. Invasion of privacy is likely going on already, and installation of cameras in a high-traffic drug and crime area is a proven tactic for reducing that activity. I don't see this as shoulder-shrugging complacency about the very real larger issue of privacy infringement, but as an opportunity to proactively reduce the drug and prostitution problems we deal with on a daily basis. I also see APD at our recent meetings, engaging with us and brainstorming ways to clean up the problem area in our neighborhood. They need our help in order to be successful in their directives, the same way we need their help to deal with the criminal element. Perhaps we can sign a memo of agreement that if privacy violations occur, the cameras will be decommissioned. Cameras, in conjunction with expanding the sit-lie ordinance, enacting the neighborhood watch, and supporting the Criminal Trespass Authority initiative, can send a clear message that as a united community, we will no longer tolerate the kind of crime that has become commonplace at 12th and Chicon. M. Lawyer responded, right, or limit camera views to areas of concern and set up a legal agreement where every 5 years the neighborhoods can choose to decommission the cameras or not. Activity has plummeted at Mission Possible in the Prayer Cafe where cameras have been installed. Lawyer. My friend T partially opined. Are you familiar with the Fusion Center, ARIC? Any of ACLU's concerns about where footage will end up, the policies not in place to control access, custody, storage, and transmission? Depending on the grants used to buy cameras, there are all kinds of strings to determine who does what with the footage gathered. No neighborhood is going to control or negotiate anything once the cameras go up. It's like thinking that Keeling can make Summit Housing do what they want, only way more delusional. I wonder if folks have given any thought to where the dealers are going to go when the cameras are installed. Into your Hood or Sweet Hill or Robinson Hill or Cherrywood? Then lawyer shot back. I want to be clear that I do not want to live in a police state or support privacy invasions. But I desperately want to catch these druggy assholes on camera and get them busted! Exclamation point. I'm hoping there's a way we can do that without getting into the Fusion Project and or any other such problems. I didn't realize this had come through the organization called Ocean. After watching the video and reading the article, I understand better the concerns. I revert back to my request for a solution. How would you feel about our neighborhoods coming together to install our own cameras that could be used to collect evidence against criminals to help prosecute them? I've been thinking about setting up a camera on my property and having crack TV. Are you on crack? I could collect the evidence myself and be sure it wouldn't go to the Fusion Center or other groups and help police to bust people. We could work together and have more control over where cameras are placed and how they would be used. Lawyer. All right. I think I have heard enough. Why is it that people who do not have any idea of an issue, hang on a second, any idea of an issue, think they can find a solution just because they're one of 7 people that show up at a neighborhood meeting, or because they're a lawyer, or because they went to college? Let me go back to my memo from February 4th, 2010 and reiterate the problems. This is my citizens communication speech. It takes 3 minutes. Mayor Leffingwell, council members, my name is Goldie and I'm an Eastside property owner within the sweep of the proposed surveillance cameras at 12th and Chicon. I'm here to warn you about the proposed cameras as well as the proposed Wi-Fi transmitting mobile units. After discussions with Commander Gay and Ocean directors and a review of the APD narrative regarding the cameras, I've become disgusted and outraged at both the slapdash process for seeking informed consent and APD's inability and or unwillingness to share key details about this program with affected stakeholders. Please note that APD's application to DOJ states that this surveillance plan will target property and violent crime, but at 12th and Chicon, the crime is prostitution and drug sales. The community input sought by APD and Councilmember Cole was some opaque request to Ocean for its input. What right does Ocean have to consent to this personal intrusion on my behalf? My outrage is that this is not a zoning or land use case or a case about heights or uses. This is the ultimate intrusion, the ultimate taking, the taking of me. And the intrusion into my bathroom, my living room, my bedroom, my kitchen, my front yard, my backyard, and the freedom of me, my family, and my friends to enter my property. Ocean tabled their vote following these discussions. What action would be required to properly gauge community input on this matter? Community input would have to include every single property owner, resident, and tenant within the surveillance camera sweep, and not your normal neighborhood contact planning team, or for that matter, any neighborhood group that would be outside of that sweep. Commander Gay and the APD cannot answer where the cameras will be located. What will be the extent of their sweep? How strong will the lenses be? 10,000 to 1 like in London or on the Mansfield Dam. Who will have access to the streams and recordings? Anyone in APD or the Fusion Center? Whether they will be monitored and by whom? APD has contradicted itself on this issue. Or how long and on what basis the recordings, if any, will be kept. How could anyone possibly make an informed decision to sanction placing these highly intrusive cameras in residential areas without the answers to these questions? How do you get community input until you determine the community that is affected? Since we don't have the answer to any of these key questions and we can't actually determine the community from which we want input, it is then impossible, let me say it again, impossible for any group or individual in an informed manner to vote, suggest, or presume to recommend these cameras at 12th and Chicon, or for that matter, Rudberg, Montopolis, or downtown. The bottom line is that there is no valid community input on this issue. The best way to solve the crime problem at 12th and Chicon or any other problem corner is more regular detective investigations and a regular public police presence during school hours, as school children from Keeling regularly walk past this corner. At the Ocean meeting, while we all agreed crime was a problem at this corner, heads were nodding in agreement with a few local longtime residents that maybe they had not thought through all of the unanswered questions and privacy issues. Separate question, what is the liability to the city of the unauthorized and damaging distribution of these images? Crime at 12th and Chicon is a problem, but the loss and taking of this most important of property rights, privacy, from me and all other completely uninformed stakeholders and school children, as well as the expansion of the surveillance society in this completely frivolous manner, is not something that any members of this body should want to be a part of. How dare you give up my sacred and constitutional right to privacy to APD and the Fusion Center without a search warrant? This surveillance cannot be done safely and securely. A weak assurance by APD will not possibly safeguard this data. I ask council please direct the APD to amend its grant, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Thank you. As you may remember, following this speech, APD cornered me, and then they decided not to put cameras at this location. However, what I'm now having to argue against is this neighborhood association asking APD to put up cameras, or as the email showed, they may want to put up private cameras. How stupid and thoughtless can you be? Well, this is what I mean. I have to keep, you keep fighting it. You keep fighting the battle. Because there's idiots that say we can give up some privacy for security, and of course those people deserve neither. Now, I'll get to their more difficult question. In fact, let me do that. I'll walk through this very quickly, and I'll get to their difficult question of private cameras. Now, they can't answer any of the questions. Where's the camera going to be? Who's going to look at it? These freaking idiots think that somehow you can look and see a crime occurring on the camera. So that means you're going to run footage 24 hours a day, and somebody's going to monitor it. If they do a private camera from a private property, then if I get filmed, I'm going to sue them because I didn't consent. If I get filmed on my property. Obviously, there's some argument that if you go into the public space, maybe you've consented to being photographed. I don't think you do. I don't know the answer to that question. But as far as security of the images, who's looking at them, it's going to be this guy. He's going to be scrolling around. Remember the original problem, a 25-year-old kid looking at a light that goes on in an upstairs bathroom? Who's his lawyer? And then what is he going to do? He's going to call the police? I don't mind a neighborhood watch. I just don't like digital images that can't be controlled. Once they're out there, they're out there. Irreparable harm. And what is the liability to the neighborhood association? I'm going to have to withdraw from the neighborhood association because I don't want to be sued. Publicly. I'll have to withdraw because I don't want that liability. If he wants to do it as a private person and I get an image on there, I'm going to demand seeing the image. And if I'm on there, I'll sue him. And he thinks that he has some capital R right to put up a camera in a public place. He'll probably make the argument that I'm okay being on camera. And we all know from past Goldie's rants. When you say, I'm okay with being filmed, it means you're saying, I'm okay with you being filmed. And you don't have that right. You don't have the right to tell me I can murder you. Similarly, you don't have the right to give up my civil liberties. You don't have that right. What about the school children? What about anybody that's walking to Jean May's bar, coming around that corner? So once these images, let's say they go to APD or the Fusion Center, it's facial recognition. You come up 3 or 4 times and they're going to start looking at you. It can't be done. That's the point. We don't trust the government to do anything right, but yet we trust the government to do this right? We're worried about garbage collection, when in fact we should be worried about images being put on YouTube, escaping images. Google just got hacked by China on a fishing expedition, PH fishing. I can't wait for this meeting because I'll actually be able to lose it. I asked for an agenda item. That means I'm not just one of the people talking. I am the person talking. Somebody interrupts me, I'll say, shut the F up. I asked him to invite all of his pro-camera people there because I don't care if there's any anti-camera people there. I don't need any. He can't answer the threshold question anyway. Who's within the sweep of the camera? If you can't answer that question, you can't say the majority of neighborhood folks support the cameras? What are you talking about? This neighborhood is south of 12th, not north. They're asking to put a camera in a different neighborhood? I hope they put them up and get sued, big time. All right. In the Austin American Statesman, June 6, 2011, there was a blurb about the undeclared war in Libya. NATO steps up attacks, hits military barracks. British jets hit a military barracks in the Libyan capital, intensifying NATO pressure on Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, nearly 4 months into an uprising to end his erratic 42-year rule. The airstrikes on the barracks followed the Western Alliance's first use of attack helicopters Saturday. By intensifying attacks from the air, and using helicopters to target government forces, NATO is providing a major boost to Libyan rebel forces who have seized much of the country's east. Close quotes. Just remember, we're not using ground troops. Oh yeah, that's right. We are using ground troops, but only in limited roles. Oh yeah, we are using ground troops in limited roles, but this is only going to take a few weeks. oh yeah, it's going to take more than a few weeks, but at least we're helping to prevent a humanitarian crisis. Oh yeah. It's not about 1.8 million barrels per day. There was an article in the Austin American-Statesman dated June 7, 2011 entitled, Libyan Rebels Accused of Abusing Detainees. They even use this freaking message word detainee. Just say prisoners. Let me read a little bit. Quotes, Libyan rebels have arbitrarily detained dozens of civilians suspected of supporting Muammar Gaddafi, and at least one has died after apparently being tortured while in custody. Human Rights Watch said Monday, close quotes. As of May 28th, rebel authorities held about 330 people, Human Rights Watch said in a report released Sunday. It remains unclear how many are civilians because rebel authorities often do not distinguish them from fighters, seeing all Gaddafi supporters as enemies of the revolution. Are you sickened yet? Well, you should be. You should have been sickened when we just started killing Libyan babies. And if you're a Democrat, seriously, call me. If you support this war, call me. I want to talk to you. Send me an email. And I again ask, where are you Democrats that were anti-war during Bush? Do you think your children are safer due to this Democratic Party-inspired military undeclared war? Are they? How do you act like you have morals if you support this slaughter in the name of oil? Democrats or Republicans? I mean, Republicans are saying he's not doing it right. So Republicans always have to shut their eyes and hold their breath and just say, well, whatever, we're not killing, we need more oil. But Democrats, God, how can you vote for this guy again? If you care about life, painful. I was in the doctor's office, and there was the November 2010 issue of Car and Driver, which I never read. I started reading it. You may remember me hammering on the theme of commonized costs, privatized profits by Garrett Hardin, which forces all of us taxpayers to subsidize private corporations' profits. Last week, I talked a bit about the wrong question. One of the items that leads to the wrong question is the idea that if you buy a hybrid, you're helping the world. South Park did an episode on the Prius that was hilarious. Anyway, in the article, Aaron Robinson details some of the elements that are required for the batteries in these hybrids. I've spoken in the past that we have no idea how much energy, water, or lives that each car takes to produce. I've spoken in the past that the true cost of disposing of most items is not included in the price. Specifically the cost of oil. When you think about the cost of oil, we don't pay the true price. Let me read some relevant sentences that show Robinson asking the right question. Quotes, cobalt is one of the elements needed for these batteries. Cobalt extraction typically goes hand in hand with copper and nickel mining. About 80% of the world's cobalt supply is believed to be in Central Africa's Copper Belt, a band of ancient mineral-endowed soil straddling Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Hang on. Sorry. The Congo, two countries today bear the word Congo in their names, began a tumultuous independence from Belgium in 1960, culminating in a meltdown of relations among its various ethnicities following the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Since then, more than 5 million people are estimated to have been killed fighting in the DRC, with the world's demand for electronic devices helping fuel the slaughter. At least here is one person actually going beyond the label of hybrid to look at all of the costs of producing these green objects that make so many of us Americans feel sanctimonious, like we're doing good for the world. And I was surprised to see it in Car and Driver, but it's a very good point. Whenever you do something green or you think is green, you got to go back to the energy used to produce it, the water to produce it, and look at the energy to move the water to that place and how many lives it costs. That's the real cost. And you can't even put a price on the lives. I mean, we went to Iraq for oil. How many lives did it cost? 150,000 Iraqis. And look at the price of oil now, $3.59 a gallon. Gas? All right, something totally separate. Apparently Kevorkian died last week. And there was an op-ed in the New York Times dated June 8, 2011, written by Ross Douthat. Kevorkian failed to make the case for murder. It's worth me reading because it kind of gets into some of these issues of healthcare. It relates back also to the idea that some idiots want to give up their civil liberties and maybe they don't have the capital R right to do so. And similarly, most states do not believe you have a right to assist somebody in suicide. And I don't have the answer yet. I can sure say that having seen dementia, I would sure like the ability to kill myself if necessary if I was in pain. And to have somebody help me do it if I was a quadriplegic. Do you watch $1 Million Baby? All right. The case for assisted suicide seems to depend on human sympathy on the impulse toward mercy, the desire to ease what seems like pointless pain and suffering. Why shouldn't the terminally ill meet death on their own terms rather than at the end of a prolonged agonies? Why shouldn't the dying depart this earth with dignity instead of enduring the inexorable stripping away of their physical and mental faculties? Such are the sentiments that made Jack Kevorkian, who died last week of natural causes, a hero to many millions of Americans. Though he was tried repeatedly and finally convicted of second-degree murder, the former pathologist's career as Dr. Death, he said he assisted at more than 130 suicides, was widely regarded as a form of humanitarianism rather than a criminal enterprise. But if such sentiments are understandable, they are morally perilous as well. I agree. We do not generally praise doctors who help dispatch their terminally ill patients, as Kevorkian repeatedly and unashamedly did. Even when death is inevitable and inevitably painful, it is not considered merciful to prescribe an overdose to a cancer victim against her will, or to gently smother a sleeping Alzheimer's patient. True. And by the way, there's a great House episode on it where Wilson, who's a chemo doctor, does a speech, and House gives him drugs and makes him pass out, and House gives the speech. But it is a great thing because apparently all oncologists participate in this. Not all, but most are dealing with this particular ethical issue. Back to it. The difference, of course, is that Kevorkian's clients asked for it. That free choice is what separates assisted suicide from murder, his defenders would insist. But that means that the moral case for assisted suicide depends much more on our respect for people's own desire to die than on our sympathy for their devastating medical conditions. If participating in a suicide is legally and ethically acceptable, in other words, it can't just be because cancer is brutal and dementia is dehumanizing. It can only be because there's a right to suicide. And once we allow that such a right exists, the arguments for confining it to the dying seem arbitrary at best. He's right. We're all dying day by day. Day by day. Do the terminally ill really occupy a different moral category from the rest? This is a great point. A cancer patient's suffering isn't necessarily more unbearable than the more indefinite agony of someone living with multiple sclerosis or quadriplegia or manic depression. And not every unbearable agony is medical. If a man losing a battle with Parkinson's disease can claim the relief of physician-assisted suicide, then why not a devastated widower or a parent who has lost her only child? This is a great op-ed. It isn't a hypothetical slippery slope. Kevorkian spent his career putting that dark, expansive logic into practice. He didn't just provide death to the dying. He helped anyone whose suffering seemed sufficient to warrant his deadly assistance. When the Detroit Free Press investigated his practice in 1997, it found that 60% of those he assisted weren't actually terminally ill. In several cases, autopsies revealed no anatomical evidence of disease. The record was ignored or glossed over by his admirers. So were the roots of his interest in euthanasia. Kevorkian was obsessed with human experimentation and pined for a day when both assisted suicides and executions would be accompanied by vivisection. After his release from prison in 2007, he was treated like a civil rights revolutionary rather than a killer, with fawning interviews on 60 Minutes, $50,000 speaking engagements, and a hagiographic HBO biopic starring Al Pacino. Fortunately, the revolution Kevorkian envisioned hasn't yet succeeded. Despite decades of agitation, only 3 states allow some form of physician-assisted suicide. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous 1997 decision, declined to invent a constitutional right to die. There is no American equivalent of the kind of suicide clinics that have sprung up in Switzerland, providing painless poisons to people from around the globe. Remember Soylent Green. Writing in The Atlantic 3 years ago, Bruce Falconer profiled one such clinic, Dignitas, founded by a former journalist named Ludwig Manelli, which charges around $6,000 for its administrations. Like Kevorkian, Minnelli sees himself as a crusader for what he calls the last human right. And like Kevorkian, he sees no reason why this right, a marvelous possibility given to a human being as he describes it, should be confined to the dying. A study in the Journal of Medical Ethics suggested that 21% of the people whom Dignitas helps to commit suicide are not terminally ill. But unlike Kevorkian, Minnelli has been free to help kill the suicidal without fear of prosecution. In the last 15 years, more than 1,000 people have made their final exit under his supervision, eased into eternity by a glass of sodium pentobarbital. Were Minnelli operating in the United States, he might well have as many apologists and admirers as the late Dr. Death, but it should make us proud of our country that he would likely find himself in prison where murderers belong. I find the question very interesting. Do you have the right to commit suicide? And if you do, does someone else have the right to help you? And I'm not going to answer this question. I just found it great arguments. He discussed this issue. It's great. Slippery slope. Ethics. We're all dying day by day. We're all terminally ill. We will all die eventually. Great questions. Things for us to think about when it comes to healthcare. That's all there is today. I want to thank our sponsors, all of which support this form of conversation, but not necessarily the content of this conversation. PianoByAngelo.com, Angelo Limbessis, who teaches and plays keyboards all over Austin. ZetaDesign.com for all of your decorative painting needs. She can make anything look like anything. AustinAreaPlumbing.com for all of your Austin plumbing problems. www.ticoadventurelodge.com, a small hotel in Samara, Costa Rica. CNC Surf School in Samara, www.cncsurfsamara.webs.com. La Vela Latina, a great sunset bar and restaurant in Samara. Ambar Tequila at www.santospirits.com, an extremely smooth tequila. Another cool 4-unit green hotel in Samara called The Logan at www.thelogansamara.com. And of course, the Delicate Genius in Houston, who is a platinum sponsor. Thanks for coming out.